the neighborhood movie nerd, back to give you guys everything that is going on in the world of movies and TV. And I'm here with a batch of reviews for you guys. And we're starting off with...
Snowing.
Winter.
No. There's only so much pretentiousness I can take. Get that out of there. I'm thinking of Ending Things, Charlie Kaufman's latest directorial outing that went right to Netflix. Understandably so. This movie is touted as the next hipster, intellectual, experimental piece. And you're gonna hear a lot of people, specifically hipsters who think that they know what they're talking about with movies, ranting and raving about how brilliant this movie is on the internet. And I watched it and I wanted to gouge my eyes out. Charlie Kaufman is an absolutely brilliant writer. Some of his screenwriting credits alone include Being John Malkovich, Adaptation, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Three of the most groundbreaking and provocative films of the last decade. Now granted, I haven't seen Synecdoche, New York and Anomalisa, which are the two films that he directed in addition to writing, but I have to say that if they're anything like this movie, then I have even less of a desire to watch them than I already did. The basic premise of this movie is that Jessie Buckley portrays a woman who is contemplating breaking things up with her brand new boyfriend, portrayed by Jesse Plemons, on the eve of the night that he's taking her to see his parents for the first time. They head out of the city into the country on a very cold and snowy night, and randomness occurs, because what the advertising failed to mention to you, and rightfully so, because nobody would watch it if it was advertised like this, is that this movie is a surrealist nightmare, and not in a cohesive, actually interesting sense, because there is no actual structure to this movie. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's kind of like a David Lynch movie. And to that I say, David Lynch's movies actually have stories that they're trying to tell. No, this is something that I'd much more so compare to an Agnes Varda piece, or famously for anybody who went to film school, you've absolutely watched this, Un Chien Andalou, or The Andalusian Dog, which for anyone who's not familiar, is just a series of images that is edited together in order to comprise a film, when really it's simply just a visual art piece. If you're looking at this from that lens, then I'm sure you'll enjoy this. But as a film, yeah, this movie makes absolutely no fucking sense. It's pretentious as all hell. It's extremely hipsterish and not in a good way. It is playing around with a lot of different themes, too many if you ask me to actually keep track of. And every time that it tries to actually delve into one of those themes with an actual ounce of cohesion, it just doubles back and jumps into another crazy visual. The acting, which kills me even more because these are all brilliant actors here. You've got Jessie Buckley and Jesse Plemons as the two main characters, and then you've got Toni Collette and David Thewlis portraying his parents. And they all give absolutely impeccable performances. The problem is that specifically with the parents, it's the type of performances that are just weird for the sake of being weird, which is one of those things that when done wrong, I cannot stand. This movie, sure, I guess gets points for creativity, good acting, and I guess good set design and cinematography and camera work and stuff. Like, the editing is good. It's what I would expect from a surrealist piece like this. But where I have to draw the line is between visual art and movies, and taking out the fact that it's 2020 and COVID and everything, is the fact that when I watch a movie, I want there to, at the very least, be a story. I'm sorry if that makes me a little bit conformist. I'm sorry if that makes me not as open-minded as I probably should be as a critic, but there has to be a story there first and foremost. And any inkling of a story that was there just was lost in all the rest of the nonsense that happened. So with that being said, I'm thinking of Ending Things I unfortunately cannot recommend, and I'm only giving this movie 2 out of 5 stars.
Good morning, American High.
Except one night a year, when all drugs and alcohol are...
Next up is the latest movie from the production studio by where I went to school, American High, The Binge. Or should I say the next Superbad ripoff? Yeah, I'm just gonna say this right now. Anybody who said that Booksmart was derivative and not this is a fucking hypocrite. So needless to say, my Big Time Adolescence review was very biased, but I think that bias is also well-founded because, you know, that was a really good movie. This, on the other hand, had humor that I'd seen before, jokes that I'd seen before, improv style that I'd seen before, hell, even actors that I'd seen before. Not to mention the fact that it's almost like this movie is going out of its way to try and be exactly like Booksmart, considering the fact that it shares 2 actors. Because Skylar Gisondo and Eduardo Franco, 2 of the main 3 guys in this movie, were both in Booksmart. Yeah, I don't want to go out of my way to dump on this movie too harshly, not only because this is another movie that a bunch of my friends from up north worked on, but also because one of my friends actually stars in the movie. Yeah, all I can say is that this wasn't my cup of tea. The premise was actually a really fascinating premise, and unfortunately, really didn't do as much with it as it probably should have, or really could have. Jokes to me weren't that funny. The improv style wasn't that funny. The story, again, we've seen it a million times before. It's literally super bad with just a new coat of paint splashed right over it. Like, here's what I'll say is the difference between this and Booksmart. Booksmart was at the very least trying to be its own thing for the most part, and really didn't become super derivative of Superbad until the last act. This movie, it's like once they got past the opening narration, it's like they weren't even trying. The one part of this movie that actually did stand out and was like a little different and was legitimately acting his ass off was Vince friggin' Vaughn. And yeah, this movie showed that he has not lost any of his comedy chops, and he to me was the shining example of what this movie kind of should have been. Like, he's just so absolutely insane, and it's another thing where you can clearly tell he's got a lot more experience than a lot of the rest of these guys as far as the improv nature of it goes. But yeah, this movie is unfortunately yet another waste of time, turn your brain off kind of goofy comedy that you've seen 1.5 million times before. I didn't really laugh at that many of the jokes, much more so with the actors' antics. And the antics that I did laugh at, I was mostly just kind of laughing because I really didn't have that much else to do, and because some of the performances were legitimately zany enough to carry the very, very repetitive material. But yeah, this is another 2.5 out of 5 stars for me.
Do you know what mutants are?
Wow. 2020, at least this last quarter of 2020, has been more forgiving than I thought. Because in addition to getting back to theaters, which is something that I didn't think I was going to be able to do for the rest of the year, something else happened this year that I didn't think was ever actually going to happen ever, just considering the sheer amount of times that this movie has been delayed. But people, Disney actually stuck to its word, and the New Mutants got released. And to hype this up even further, I actually really enjoyed this movie. It's a little bit problematic because there are two different discussions to be had here: the actual quality of the movie and the behind the scenes problems. But as far as the behind the scenes problems go, I can only attribute this to, again, what was my original assumption with why this movie kept getting delayed, which was the Disney-Fox merger. They did the whole reshoots excuse like they did with Dark Phoenix. Again, I have to assume that the only thing that they cut was the post-credits scene. That was very clearly supposed to be setting up for this movie to have future sequels within the former Fox X-Men universe with Mr. Sinister as the main villain. But they cut that, obviously, but all the other references to Essex Corporation and future sequels are still in this movie. But taking all of that out of it, yeah, this was a very charming movie. If anything, this movie kind of really made me nostalgic for the Fox X-Men days, because I know everyone is excited about what Disney is going to do with them now that they have all of the Marvel superheroes under their one belt. But I gotta say that after Days of Future Past, the X-Men movies really seem to be stepping it up as far as just being ambitious and wanting to go in different directions. And this, to me, is the latest example of the fact that had they not been bought up by Disney, they would have actually gone and done some really interesting and different and unique superhero movies. Kind of like what DC is trying to do now. Because this, for the most part, is not a superhero movie. It's literally Breakfast Club meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Only throw in some superpowers and some nightmarish hallucinations. The basic premise is that the movie focuses around the character of Danielle Moonstar, portrayed in the movie by Blue Hunt, as she's the victim of this strange attack by this demon bear that wipes out her entire village along with her family. And as a result, she's sent to this strange mental asylum, very similar to Glass, which is supposed to be a safe place for mutants, which of course is where she meets the other members of the New Mutants, which I don't actually think they mentioned that title within the movie. That, of course, being Maisie Williams, Rain Sinclair, aka Wolvesbane, Charlie Heaton, Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, Henry Zaga's Roberto DaCosta, aka Sunspot, and the MVP of this movie, Anya Taylor-Joy's Ileana Rasputin, aka Magic. But yeah, I gotta say, I really enjoyed how much these actors work together, because with the exception of one person, these are all, for the most part, very talented young up-and-coming actors who all actually have an understanding of the material that they're being given and are actually able to incorporate and add a surprising amount of depth to these characters. You know, you got Anya Taylor-Joy as kind of the spunky rebel, and Charlie Heaton as the guy who's afflicted with PTSD, and Henry Zaga as the reluctant heartthrob, and Maisie Williams as the more low-key, quiet, shy girl. And the thing I like is that they actually do give each and every one of these characters a surprisingly serious amount of baggage to deal with. That's before we even get into like the mutant weird vision antics that happen at the asylum. That stuff is kind of just whatever. It's kind of just there in order to move the movie along and in order to give it a setting. But I really gotta say, these actors and these characters really did a good job of carrying me through it. It actually did allow for me to have a very big enjoyment of this movie. It's so funny because, again, the biggest thing that I always said about Fox's X-Men movies is that they never really had, is that with the exception of the main X-Men trilogy, they never really had any in-between movie. They were either great or sucked. Days of Future Past, First Class, Logan, and the two Deadpools, great. Dark Phoenix, Apocalypse, and Origins, awful. The Wolverine is weird because that's in its own little weird spot, but I have to say, this one, again, rests in the category of it was very impressive and surprising. It's not an amazing, incredible movie, but it's got a lot to enjoy. I think taking aside all the behind-the-scenes problems with this movie and just appreciating the fact that this movie even exists and was able to be released, my one actual big problem with it is the lead. Because as compelling as the other four young actors are, this girl, Blue Hunt, I think this is her first major movie, and it shows. This girl's trying as hard as she possibly can, and she's under good direction because Josh Boone once again proves that he knows how to direct these young actors. Like, they did a good job as far as hiring the right director for this type of job. But yeah, she was just, every time she had to act tough, or every time she had like an engrossing line, just every emotion that she emoted just felt off. So that's really the only big slight that I would say against this movie. But other than that, yeah, this is an enjoyable time. It really sucks because it's almost impossible to actually watch a mainstream superhero movie now and just take it, you know, as a movie and kind of forget all the other superhero universe stuff, because every single superhero property has to be a universe now. And it does suck that this movie does contain references that, for those who remember, were eventually going to set up for other sequels in the now non-existent Fox X-Men universe. But just taking this as a movie in and of itself, I very, very much enjoyed it, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I'm giving this movie 4 stars. And that was it. Those were my reviews for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, The Binge, and The New Mutants. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Be sure to click that like button, that subscribe button, and the bell next to it. That way you get notified every time we put up new content. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV, no G. As always, people, watch more fucking